Welcome back. This is our first event, and we really want to establish that at Walden Wise, we're focused on conversation and dialogue. To do that, we've convened a panel of co creators who wear many hats. They're moms, dads, scientists, researchers, and teachers. Our expert co creators will share some information about themselves and their work, then answer questions from you. Please use the Q&A feature to ask questions that are on your mind and use the chat feature to share general information and feedback. Walden Wise staff will monitor both features to get your questions and feedback to our co-creators and our experts. Now we're going to do our second round of poll questions. The first question is, how do you currently rank the importance of emotional health for kids? Just like last time, you can answer by clicking on the screen, and we'll give you about 30 seconds. All right, now let's get started and introduce our co-creator panel. All right, there is our panel. All right, so as I introduce you, if you would introduce yourself by starting by what type of co-creator you are, and um, and then answering the question. So, first question: the emotional health of our kids has clearly been impacted by COVID. What observations have you made in your professional and personal roles? Let's start with you, Abby.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Abby Williams, and I am a mom and a teacher co-creator. I've been teaching for 15 years. I'm a content lead, and in talking with my colleagues and educators across the country, the most common issue that keeps coming up is the amount of classroom time that we've spent helping students process through their emotions appropriately. We've seen a decrease in communication skills and their ability to work together cohesively. We've seen students, they were silos at home and they've come back and they are silos at school, and we are trying to bring them back to work together now. We've seen students become very apathetic and they are struggling to find the energy to get their work done. And it's struggles before to get work done, but even more now. And they're lacking empathy with each other. They are getting frustrated more easily, and their frustrations are coming out um, in different ways. And one of my students just the other day, I was having a conversation with her, and my mama heart just broke because she said that she just had a sense of hopelessness, and that was really hard to hear that. We've seen students seem emotionally stunted, and what I mean by that is with a common eighth grader, typical eighth grader, they're experiencing more like fourth grade behaviors because that was the last time they had a full year of in-person learning. And so the emotions that they are exhibiting are more like fourth grade behaviors than seventh grade behavior going through puberty. So imagine a seventh grader exhibiting fourth grade behaviors and going through puberty. That is so difficult. Um, and so what that means is many of our students are presenting 3 years behind their current grade level that they are in emotionally. And that's a struggle.
Thank you. And Kelsey, can you answer that as well? The emotional health of kids has clearly been impacted by COVID. What are some of your observations?
Hi, I'm Kelsey Bush. I'm a dad co-creator. I'm uncle co-creator, community member co-creator. It's interesting when I was listening to Abby because my world now is on the little further in higher education,
Oh,
and much what Abby's already said, I could say ditto too. Because even with our older adults, our older individuals who should be young adults who have some sense of where of stabilization and understanding of how to approach things, it's much the same thing. It's the apathy, the lack of empathy, just the overall just lack of being where they emotionally need to be. It's distressing when you think about it, because it's that grown body, but still emotionally still being in high school. I remember having a conversation with an intern of mine, and they're a junior, and their statement to me was simply, "Hey, I still like I'm in my first year because I have no clue what's really going on." So it's taxing on multiple levels, and as a dad of elementary school kids, I see it there, how they deal with how they deal with their emotions in this situation, and the fact that having a son that right now who's obsessed with keeping his hands clean because of the germs, because that's what we told everyone to do with COVID: wash your hands. And even now, that is his tick almost, is to still gravitate towards that. So it can be depressing, but it's also the fact that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we all know that how we can get there is through love, appreciation, and care and concern for one another.
Thank you, Kelsey. And Christy, what type of co-creator are you, and what have you seen impacting kids right now?
Hey everyone, I'm Christy Byrd. I am a mom and an aunt and also a researcher. So I work at North Carolina State University. I'm an associate professor here, and I am also a program coordinator for our Educational Equity Ph.D. program. So some of the things I've noticed as a mom, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's really social. She loves just being around other people. And it's been really hard when we have to tell her, we can't go to this place, we can't go visit family in the same ways that we used to be able to when she was a little younger. So we really had to find ways to, connect with people online. Now she uses Facebook Messenger. She'll just call all of our family members. And really try and find things that we could do, inside or outside when we were visiting people. As a researcher, some of the things that we've noticed is that it's actually more difficult to do research when we would usually go and just collect data from schools and just go and visit a bunch of kids and get all the information at once. We can't quite do that when schools are closed, right? And even though now schools are opening up again, teachers and the principals are really protective of the kids, as they should be, and not necessarily wanting to say, oh, just come on in and collect the data. So we actually don't know quite as much as we could, or that we need to know about how kids are being affected during this pandemic, because we're not doing research in the same ways that we have been before.
Thank you. Let's move to our second question, and we'll start with Kelsey this time. What are some promising strategies you can share about how adults can support kids' emotional health as they move ahead together?
Well, let them lead the way. Let them be the ones who show you and tell you what they need. And don't dismiss what they're feeling, because it's not the same as when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't grow up in a pandemic. We didn't experience, years of being shut away from families and friends, and only communication being through electronic means. We didn't have our worlds completely disrupted in it. We did, but not at the same developmental point. We already had some coping skills that we could deal with. But if it requires a hug, let it be a hug. If it's snuggling, let it be snuggling. But create that safe environment so that communication can be held, or non-communication can be held. Just that reassurance that you're going to be there. So let them be the guides through the current situation, because we can learn the greatest from the littlest.
Thank you. And Christy, what have you found to be some promising strategies?
Well, some of the strategies I think about is ways to talk with my daughter and talk with kids about the things that they're interested in, but also connect it to the things that I find really important about my culture and about my identity. So some of the work I'm really excited about with Walden Wise that we've been doing is to develop some strategies and information about how do you have conversations with your kids about culture or about identity, about how they think about themselves. And one of the practices that I have, that you'll see eventually is really about just going to museums and parks and talking with kids about what happened here. So a few months ago, I went with my daughter to New Orleans, and we went to a place called Congo Square. And in the 16 and 1700s, this was outside the city limits of New Orleans. And it was a place where the enslaved Black people and the free Black people would come on their days off, and they would be able to dance together and celebrate and just like enjoy each other's company. And so I told my daughter, this is a place where our ancestors would dance, and she loves dancing. So that was the connection for her. And she's like, oh, I want to see them dancing. I want to see a video. So I had to explain like, well, they didn't have videos from back then, but I was able to find a YouTube video of a, a festival that had been held there where people were recreating some of the dances that they had. And so that was really, we spent hours there. She just was wandering around the whole park and just kind of enjoying being there. And so that was just a simple way, I think, to just bring in this idea of our culture and being African American and what people's lives were like back in the past without it having to be a whole big lecture. It was just like, let's just enjoy this beautiful area together. So I think finding ways to do those kinds of things, even when we're limited in some of the things that we can do, is a really good practice to be able to make sure that we're connecting with our children and being able to support who they are and who they're going to grow into.
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful answer. And Abby, what have you found as promising strategies?
So the other day I was having a conversation with one of my students, and she said that students feel fear with trusting adults with their problems sometimes. And so a strategy that I found that helps support kids' emotional health is letting them know that you are offering them a safe space to come and talk, and that you are going to be open to listening to what they are going through. Acknowledging that their emotions are real. Their emotions are real, but they're not always reliable. And so asking them if they want you to help or if they just want you to listen to what they are going through. Sometimes kids just want an adult to listen to them without judging what it is they are saying. And then modeling healthy behaviors is also important. Being able to be vulnerable and secure enough with what you are struggling with, because they often don't have a healthy adult at home that I found that are modeling those behaviors for them. So when they come to school, having somebody to model those behaviors for them is so important. And so just being vulnerable to that for them, and then giving support to the students when they need it. Having consistency in their lives is really important. A lot of times teachers are the consistent person in their life. They are there every single day for them. And so being there and giving them the support when they need it. And then allowing students to have a safe space to ask for an emotional health break. Having them be able to come up and say, I need a break, and being able to supply that safe space for them. But more importantly, show them how to communicate when they need that healthy break. Because the time to do that is not when they are in the middle of a crisis situation. They need to know, and they need to be taught how to have that healthy break outside of the crisis situation. And then this one is specifically, well, not specifically for special education kiddos, but it's important for special ed kiddos to build trust with their special education teachers, because they need to know who to go to when they are in a situation that they don't know how to handle. So if they are getting worked up, and I'm thinking specifically about my own son, he's autistic. And he doesn't always, when we moved to New Mexico, and he didn't know the adults that he could go to when he was starting to get worked up. And so he would elope. and he didn't always know to elope to a safe space. And so he needed to learn who were the adults that he could trust when he was getting emotionally worked up, because he would elope to an unsafe space. So helping our special ed kiddos know who they can trust when they're in a situation where they don't know how to emotionally handle it.
Thank you, Abby. And that answer ties closely to a question that's in our Q&A from Corey. So Corey, we'll come back and hit on your question a little more in a minute. And the same with you, Abe. Thank you for your thoughtful question. We have one more question we're going to ask of the panel, and then we're going to bring Eric back up and Kathleen, and they're going to be a part of the Q&A, where we're going to have people from our audience be able to ask questions, as well as our moderator, Eric, ask questions of the panel as well. So our final question for this part of our program is, what are the biggest questions you have moving forward? And Christy, I believe we'll let you go first on this one.
Sure. Well, so one of the questions I have is, how do we keep the good things that we established during the pandemic? So I think that the pandemic gave us the opportunity to rethink how we did certain things and to learn new things about ourselves. So one kind of silly example is that I used to hate going to the grocery store. I would just pay for Instacart because I just hated the grocery store. But during the pandemic, I just wanted to get out of the house, so I would go to the grocery store just to walk around and feel like I was doing something. But now I actually really appreciate the opportunity to go. I know the whole store layout and I know where everything is. So it's really feel like, okay, I can just go through and be really efficient. So that's something I learned about myself that I appreciate from, being forced into the pandemic. But if you think about the ways at the university that we've been adapting to students' needs and being flexible in the ways that we grade and expect class engagement, the ways I've been able to connect with colleagues online. I've been visiting lots of different classes all around the country because I can virtually, whereas before I wouldn't have been able to travel to those places. So those are some of the really cool practices that we've adopted during the pandemic that can actually support people's emotional health and support our learning from each other, that I hope that we'll be able to figure out how to keep those even once we're going back to, being more in person. And I think the second question is really, how do we honor the experiences that kids have had during this time? Like I said, some people have really had the opportunity to learn new things about themselves and to grow. And some kids have been able to experience schools or communities in different ways than they had before. So when we go back, how do we not just sort of say okay, well, just forget about all that time and go back to what you were doing, but actually say look, let's take those things that you've learned and bring them into this new world that we're in. So, yeah.
Thank you, Christy. And Abby, same question for you. What are some big questions moving forward?
I think some big questions moving forward that educators are having is where's the support going to come from to help the kids return to some sort of normal? We are stretched very thin with the resources and the abilities that we have to help the students work through all of these emotional struggles that they're having. And we are trying so hard to help meet them where they are, because they have seen so much loss and they've seen so much they've just had a lot of struggles. And so one of the things that we have really been seeing too is substance abuse with families, and how can we help students who are using substances themselves, and how can we help students and their families deal with the substance abuse within their homes. So, can we get drug counselors into our buildings? Can we get drug counseling help to our communities, that sort of thing? Because from New Mexico to Toledo, Ohio, where I used to work, we are having those conversations. So just getting more help to our kids, to our families across the board. Where can we get that help?
Thank you so much. And we're going to throw it to Kelsey to kind of wrap up this section before we take questions from our attendees and other guests.
All right.
What are the biggest questions that you're seeing moving forward?
I don't want to be the downer, but one of mine is, how do we get ourselves to come back together as community? And what does community look like now? Because all of us have been through trauma. And we all have to understand that we've been through a collective shared trauma, but as adults, we're trying to run back in like the house hasn't been on fire. And it doesn't make sense because we're not setting great examples for our children. In essence, when do we get our empathy back for one another? Instead of fighting the other, trying to find commonalities and grow towards one another and uplift one another instead of tearing each other down. Plenty of these questions were what we were pondering probably before the pandemic, but they've just been highlighted in the midst of, and with tomorrow being the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, we can't forget how that galvanized us, but also drove a wedge between some of us because of how we don't empathize about pain and anguish. So there's a lot of different questions that are going on, but the big one I have is, much like Abby and Christy have already said, how do we take what we've learned, the positive things, and use those to continue to move us forward?
Thank you to everyone on the panel. And I'm going to ask each of you to remain, and we're going to bring back Eric and Kathleen and Dr. Anderson as well, to have some more questions amongst the panel as well as from our attendees.
Wow, wow, wow. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you all so much for your thoughts. My mind is buzzing. And I am so excited to be able to host and moderate some of the questions that the audience has submitted. Everyone will be able to see the questions that are on the side. Feel free to bring more in. If we can't talk about them now, we're going to transition after this into a casual lounge setting where you'll have the chance to chat about everything that we've discussed, plus the questions that have been brought in, both with other audience members and the panel themselves. So, before we kick it off, I'd love to welcome back Walden Wise's CEO, Dr. Kathleen O'Brien, to help me direct these questions.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and thank you to the panelists. That was really a wonderful conversation, and that's the kind of wonderful conversations that we hope that we're stimulating here tonight. We want to see a lot more of those go on in the lounge as we go forward. Eric, I wanted to know, do you have any questions?
My biggest question is what's the community dying to know about? I'm excited to get into these because, as a researcher, my work really, what makes it matter is when it impacts someone's life. And so knowing that you all are here soaking this in, I want to know, what are you hoping to learn about and how can we help you support children?
Okay. So here's another question that came from the audience. Knowing that summer is on the horizon, what are some ways we can support kids' emotional health when they are again taken out of the routine or community or school? So, Dr. Dave or anyone want to answer that?
I have a desire to answer many of these questions, but I know, I was trying to really be mindful of some of, Kelsey and Abby and Christy's answers earlier. Look, when kids are taken out of kind of the rhythm of school, I think what's also key, and I think a lot of the questions and comments are also related to this, the adults in their lives are also taken out of that rhythm. School has a predictability. You send a kid on the bus, kid comes home at a certain time, there's at least a portion of the workday in which you feel like the kid is occupied in meaningful and learning activities. So in many ways, what I think we try to think about with parents over the summer is, how they can get together with others in their community to create interesting and enriching experiences for youth, how they can think about how their work likely doesn't stop over the summer, even if kids are out of school, and how they can, make that clear to kids that they may still have to be at work even during the summer as an adult, but how they're going to take space, especially during a time when kids are trying to pull us into vacation and time off and, a little bit more unstructured spaces. And, I saw a comment, at least while Kelsey and Abby and Christy were talking, about a parent feeling like they're not doing enough. And I feel like that was a question that we got so much early on in the pandemic, where parents felt like there should be answers, but they had absolutely no idea what those answers were. And the key thing that I often came back to with families at that time was thinking about how you'd like your kids to feel at the end of the day. Not so much whether you have the perfect schedule, not so much whether you handle every moment with grace and wit and, the best parenting strategies possible, but can you make it so that either at dinner or at bedtime, there's a highlight of that particular day, a moment of bonding, a moment of connection, as much as you can muster. And most kids, that's the narrative that stays with them. That's the dominant theme. It's not necessarily, the blow up that happened at lunch, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's really, are they seen and are they loved, and is there empathy? So I think that really makes a great difference to them. So that's very helpful. There's another question here. Let's see. An experience of parenting and teaching for me is always feeling like I'm not doing enough. That's the one that you just mentioned. So we'll go past that one. Chloe, do you want to put up another question on the screen for us and we can answer it?
I can bring up one of the questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Last panel, which is this great question, kind of getting into the sense of what our aim is together, which is creating an unwavering culture of emotional health. And I'm curious for you all on the panel, how would you define emotional health? Is it the same as mental health? Is it not the same? What do you all think? What are we here to accomplish?
Yes. It's both. They're both intertwined. They do have their individual portions of our lives, but they're intertwined. And with, a great social emotional awareness, your behavioral health is going to be so much more. I mean, because it's that self-actualization, that self-realization. I look back on my relationship with my parents, because I'm of a different generation than my children. My parents did the best they could because of the way they were taught. But I'm doing the best that I could, because of the way I was taught, but in spite of the way I was taught. I learned different lessons from the good and the bad. And I know I'm making the same mistakes for my own children that they're looking at it. But how do we take what we've learned and put them together to make that, that bridge or that community, as we open up the church, that steeple, that whole thing. I can't remember the whole saying, but we want that community together that supports one another and be able to move this generation and subsequent generations forward in a better environment than some of us were raised. We're all trying to do the best work possible, but we can't do it alone. And both emotionally and with our behavioral health tied in together, it only becomes better. So I'm done babbling.
You could go on and on about that. I appreciate that. And I think we, when you know better, you do better, as the wonderful saying says. There's one other one that shows up, and then we're going to have to start wrapping things up. But what are some types of healthy breaks?
I think I could answer that one. One thing that I have my students do is, a lot of times students were sent out to the hallway for bad behavior, but I will let the students dictate where they would like to take their break. So sometimes it's a 5-minute break just sitting out in the hallway. I have students, and they're middle schoolers, but they like to bring in stuffed animals, and they like to just sit with their stuffed animal, and they just like to have it, to hold it. It's a comfort item. And so they can just sit, read their book, or do whatever comforts them for that 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I let them set their time, as long as it's not the full hour that they're in my classroom. I have students that like to sit under the desks. It's just a closed in area. So that is a healthy break that they can have. They get to choose where in my classroom that they would like to take the break. Or I can call up student services and they can go up to student services and they can take a break. And one of my favorite activities for a healthy break is I will send them on an errand to another teacher's classroom. I need you to take a bag of chips and a pop down to so-and-so's classroom, and they know that you are coming, and then come on back, because they like to do errands for me. So, and you can use that with little kids and you can use that with the older kids. And that's just a healthy little break that they can take where they are out of your room and then back, and then they can self-regulate.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. This one is really, it just showed up and it's near and dear to my heart. How can we create space and trust for our kids to build empathy and resilience? And Eric, I'm going to send that to you. That's your wheelhouse.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, a lot of my research is focusing on the things that we can do inside our own head to, catch the inner voice that really gets us down sometimes, and question it, challenge it, change it. And I'd say one of the most helpful things, and there's some emerging research showing that this is true, that helps us change our own thoughts is actually getting someone else's perspective on it. And so I'd say that having a community of people who are engaged with, what we're all trying to do together, of empower you all with good skills in managing your own and children's emotional health. If they have someone around them that they can go to who's really aware of these techniques, oh, it sounds like maybe we're making some assumptions, or, oh, I totally get why you see it that way. What if maybe this other interpretation could be explaining what's going on? Or maybe this is like this other time you were scared and then actually you really got through it. Those kinds of reinterpretations can do so much to help not only improve mood, but also help people align their behavior with things that are really going to help them succeed in the long run. Anyone else? Christy, I'm noticing we haven't, do you want to chime in? You're also in this area. What do you think?
Well, I just love that response, because it really is this idea of, you can think about things in your own head, but also sometimes it's really good to have other people reflect back to you. And so I really think it's about providing spaces for kids to just be who they are and to explore who they are, and really have that sense of like, these adults here are not going to judge me. They're not going to say you can't do that or you shouldn't do that because you're such and such, but just really having adults who are interested in them as they are right now, knowing that we all grow and change throughout our lives, but really being able to say like, hey, I'm just going to be here with you as you are right now, and you're really cool as a kid right now. So I like that. So I think that's something I would add. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. That's great. Okay. I think we really could go on and on and on, but I know we wanted to have an opportunity to have the conversation in the lounges. So I think, I just feel really excited about what we've been doing here tonight. I know that together this community can champion emotional health for the benefit of children. And we can only change the culture if we work together. So please stay involved with our organization. We've got so many exciting plans coming ahead. The coming weeks, you're going to hear a lot more. And the night's over. So what I'd like to do is continue that conversation and hear from you. I know we were going to have some slides of some of the comments from the audience. Do we have those available? Anybody? I think there were some chats, some reactions. Do we have?
Well, we had the two other poll questions we were going to do.
Okay, let's do those then. Thank you.
All right. So the first poll was, how often do you see kids in your life struggle with emotional health? And it's a shame. You probably would have guessed that it was high, but for every answer to be sometimes or often, that's way too high. And so we all have some work to do with the children in our lives, as well as with our friends that touch other children as well. Because as we look at the second poll, it shows that most of the people that responded, over 80%, said that they see that they rank the importance of emotional health of children very high. But the results of the first poll saying that they see that children are impacted greatly with their emotional health. The folks in this room on this conference this evening are doing a great job in prioritizing the emotional health of children, but there are a lot of children that are falling through the cracks based on the answers to this poll. So we all need to do better, as well as touch the other adults in our life and get them more engaged in the emotional health of children. We appreciate you being here this evening, and we want to continue this conversation.